Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition, members of Congress question Robert Mueller. The former special counsel talks about his findings in the Russia investigation and what it means for President Trump. And changes are coming to the DMV, how the state will try to modernize and speed up its customer service.
We want to make sure that our community thinks and knows that they are safe.
Quality of life in Chula Vista. From public safety to homelessness, a new survey shows where the city is succeeding and where it needs improvement.
When I say climate change, I'm not talking about 100 years from now. I'm talking about 10 years from now. Climate change is already upon us. It's going to get a lot worse.
And why a professor at the Scripps Institution says he supports the Green New Deal as a way to address climate change. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Good evening. It's Wednesday, July 24th. Thanks for joining us. I'm Ebone MOnet. Today, Robert Mueller spoke in person and in detail about Russian meddling in the 2016 election, and he says it's likely to happen again.
Groups pose a significant threat to the United States and our allies in upcoming elections. Would you agree with that?
Yes. In fact, one of the other areas that we have to look at are many more countries are developing capability to replicate what the Russians had done.
Is this, in your investigation, did you think that this was a single attempt by the Russians to get involved in our election, or did you find evidence to suggest they'll try to do this again?
No, it wasn't a single attempt. They're doing it as we sit here. And they expect to do it during the next campaign.
That exchange was part of today's hearings before House committees. Omar Jimenez has more of the takeaways.
It's been a day marked on the calendar for a long time, especially since the findings of special counsel Robert Mueller's nearly 2-year investigation were made public back in April. There was a lot covered over the course of today, but the real question is, will both Democrats and Republicans be satisfied with Mueller's testimony? Nearly 100 days after the release of the report detailing Russia's attempts to interfere in the 2016 presidential election, a reluctant Robert Mueller testified before Congress.
The finding indicates that the president was not exculpated for the acts that he allegedly committed.
Some Democrats seeing the testimony as a chance to build the case for impeachment. But Mueller says his investigation could not indict the president because of Justice Department guidelines.
I believe a reasonable person looking at these facts could conclude that all 3 elements of the crime of obstruction of justice have been met. The reason, again, that you did not indict Donald Trump is because of OLC opinion stating that you cannot indict a sitting president, correct?
That is correct.
Hours later, the former special counsel amended his testimony.
That is not the correct way to say it. We did not reach a determination as to whether the president committed a crime.
The star witness refused to say if the president committed a crime and instead referred Congress to the findings of his 448-page report as Republicans pushed to close this chapter in American history.
It's time for the curtain to close on the Russia hoax. The conspiracy theory is dead.
Now, as you can imagine, a lot of politics at play in the aftermath of the hearing. For one, the president does seem pleased with the testimony, but even outside of individual politics, there was an overarching theme, that Mueller kept going back to, and that was an existential threat, he says, all Americans are facing right now. He says in his decades of service, he has seen many threats to democracy, but the effort of Russians to interfere in our elections was among the most serious, and that, he says, is what should be attended to by every American. Reporting from Capitol Hill, I'm Omar Jimenez.
ICE says its agents acted lawfully during a violent arrest caught on camera in Kansas City. Agents are seen smashing the car window of a man they say is an undocumented immigrant. The man's girlfriend broadcast the arrest on Facebook Live. Local police in Kansas City helped ICE make the arrest. During the confrontation, the man asked to see a warrant, but agents said they had a paperless one. ICE says the man is an immigration fugitive with deportation orders to Mexico. There are new developments on the Trump administration's zero-tolerance immigration policy. KPBS reporter Max Rivlin-Nadler tells us about a ruling that could throw out hundreds of convictions from San Diego.
Since last July, many migrants caught crossing outside of a port of entry were brought here to federal court in downtown San Diego. There, they were tried and convicted in mass hearings as part of the expedited prosecution program known as Operation Streamline. Today, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals decided that the way immigrants were being charged was improper. Kara Hartzler, an attorney with the Federal Defenders of San Diego, explains.
And today what the Ninth Circuit said is that the government was basically charging these cases wrong for the last year. It said that the way that they were charging them required you to show that they were coming through a port, whereas almost all of these cases involve people coming through the desert.
And the ruling means that hundreds of cases now on appeal can be overturned, and that thousands of immigrants could clear their record if they return to the U.S.
One of the reasons that they said was it wouldn't make any sense to have both subsections, both parts of the law, essentially cover the same people. So they said it doesn't make sense to say that you can be prosecuted for going through the desert both under this first section and under the second section. And so that's why the second section has to refer to coming through at the port of entry rather than coming through in the desert.
In other immigration-related news today, 2 separate district court judges weighed in on a new Trump administration rule that would ban people from applying for asylum if they didn't first apply for asylum in any of the countries they traveled through on their way to the U.S. At the federal courthouse in downtown San Diego, Max Rivlin-Nadler, KPBS News.
Late this afternoon, a federal judge in California blocked President Trump's new restriction on asylum seekers who cross through Mexico from another country. Hours earlier, a judge in Washington allowed it to stand. The ruling in California is likely to be appealed. People in Chula Vista are split about the safety of their city. KPBS reporter Lynn Walsh says people responding to a survey gave the police department high marks while expressing concerns about homelessness and drug use.
We will continue to maintain a safe community in Chula Vista.
Chula Vista Police Department Captain Phil Collum has been working at the department for 25 years. He says the fact that more than 90% of those surveyed say they are satisfied with the agency, their professionalism, and ability to keep the community safe shows the department is on the right track.
This survey showed that the community is also proud of our organization, and that's something that makes me very happy.
While the department received high marks, the survey shows there are some areas for improvement. According to the survey, people are avoiding places in the city and do not feel safe walking at night due to the number of homeless in the area and suspected drug use. Areas people are avoiding include parks, shopping centers, and trolley stops. Captain Collum says the challenges of homelessness go beyond the role of a traditional police department.
So we certainly work very, very hard to try to lessen the impacts of crime as it relates to any homelessness. We recognize at the same time that where homelessness causes a challenge for our community, we're going to try to deploy resources as we have them.
He says they are also looking to expand their homeless outreach team. Another concern for the department is the number of people that are not reporting crimes. According to the survey, 41% of crime victims didn't report the crime to police. Reasons they didn't report include not thinking it would do any good, it being a minor crime, or the crime being hard to report. Captain Collum says they actively encourage victims to report crimes and can't help if they don't know about them.
It's never a waste of our resources when there's a crime that occurs in our community. Our entire job is to respond to and investigate crimes that occur in our community.
Captain Collum says the department is going to be working on more community outreach to make sure people know the department has no information to suggest there are issues at parks. He says all of their data suggests crime continues to decrease across the community. Lynn Walsh, KPBS News.
A business executive from Solana Beach is the latest parent to admit guilt in the college bribery scandal. Jeffrey Bizak pleaded guilty today in Boston. He paid $250,000 to get his son admitted to USC as a fake volleyball recruit. The money went to a man who ran a test rigging operation and to the university itself. Bizak will be sentenced in October. Prosecutors are seeking 9 months in prison and a fine. Facebook will pay the biggest fine ever issued to a tech company, $5 billion for privacy violations. It's part of a settlement with the Federal Trade Commission. Facebook will also add new oversight and restrictions on how user information can be shared. The case started after a data mining firm gathered details on 87 million users without their permission. One of the lead investigators explains how it worked.
Despite offering users privacy settings that promised to share their information with friends only, Facebook, in fact, shared users' information with every developer of an application installed by a user's friends. In other words, for most Facebook users, their data privacy was set not by their own choices, but by the choices of their most click-happy friends.
Facebook will admit no wrongdoing as part of the settlement. Going forward, CEO Mark Zuckerberg will be required to personally certify compliance with privacy rules. That could expose him to future civil and criminal penalties for future violations. The DMV will upgrade its website and accept credit cards in an effort to improve customer service. Capitol Public Radio's Scott Rodd has more on the findings of a new report on the troubled agency.
It's a rite of passage for Californians that Newsom wants to scrap, waiting in line for hours to renew a driver's license or register a vehicle. His DMV strike team released its final report on how to improve the department. It calls for making more services available online and creating temporary pop-up offices at major employers to reduce in-person visits. The demands on the DMV are expected to increase as residents face an October 2020 deadline to get their federally mandated Real ID. The report also calls for stabilizing, but not overhauling, the DMV's decades-old computer system. Newsom says modernizing it will take significant investment from the state. Shortly before the strike team announced its recommendations, the DMV experienced a system-wide computer outage. In Sacramento, I'm Scott Rodd.
Last month was the hottest June on record, and the same is expected for July. That's according to NOAA forecasters. The Federal Weather Agency also says 2019 is likely to be one of the 3 warmest years on record. In the short term, San Diego will see less of a chance of thunderstorms, but hot weather will continue. Paul Williams has tonight's forecast.
You're watching KPBS. I'm meteorologist Paul Williams. As we take a look at your satellite radar rendition of what's happening, we're starting to see a little bit more in the way of moisture that's making its way into southern portions of California, coming out of the northern borders of Mexico now. In general, we're looking for this flow that's going to continue to stay a bit on the enhanced side throughout the afternoon hours, and we'll have a better chance of scattered showers beginning to kind of form very quickly as a result of that. Now, that moisture content is going to hover right along that Arizona and California border, and we'll continue to see that monsoonal moisture now starting to kick in for us. I mean, we're overdue for more moisture in the area anyway, because we're lagging as far as percentiles with our moisture content and the rain that we expect during this time of the year. Now, as you take a look at what's expected for the rest of Wednesday going to Wednesday evening, we're looking for widespread scattered showers, more so as you move further inland. Now, we're going to see just a small smattering of a scattered shower or two for us for the rest of Wednesday evening, but we're looking at an enhanced opportunity for scattered showers likely for us throughout the afternoon heating. For the afternoon heating showers, it's probably going to be our best bet because that monsoonal moisture is just not directly over us at this point. For tonight, 70 degrees with partly cloudy skies. And then for tonight's forecast, we are expecting a slight chance of spot showers to develop for us, and Mount Laguna dropping back to 63 degrees for the overnight low. And then for tomorrow's forecast, we're looking at more in the way of sunshine, for example, in San Diego with a few scattered clouds here and there, and 78 for the high. We're going to climb to about 80 in Mount Laguna with another chance of a spot shower, just that isolated curvature, that small pocket of scattered shower activity where the hope's going to be for any moisture there. We have a dominant high pressure system. It's still in the neighborhood, so to speak. We still have hot conditions just kind of brewing its way throughout a good portion of the west side of the country, and we're going to be in the midst of that. Here's a look at the 5-day forecast for the coast. Temperature staying in the low 80s with abundant sunshine, for example, by Saturday. Overnight lows hovering in the 60s for the coast. Now, as you move further inland, obviously a little bit warmer for us. Mostly sunny and warm. 90 for Friday, 91 on Saturday, 91 on Sunday. Going to be warm with sunshine. Watching out for a little bit of fog and low clouds on Monday. And then for the desert, we'll climb to 109 on Friday after scattered showers on Thursday, by the way, and up to 112 on Saturday and Sunday. I'm meteorologist Paul Williams with your KPBS forecast.
Conservation and climate change. Tonight we have interviews on both topics. In a moment we'll hear from an SDSU researcher on how illegal fishing is threatening sharks. But first, KPBS Midday Edition co-host Jade Hyman on the consequences of our warming planet and what can be done about it. She talked with Scripps climate scientist Ram Ramanathan about the Green New Deal.
Ram, thank you so much for taking time to talk to us today. It's beautiful out here. What's the first thing you notice about the air?
It looks today very clean, right? And with climate change, there are three things which are going to change. When I say climate change, I'm not talking about 100 years from now. I'm talking about 10 years from now. Climate change is already upon us. It's going to get a lot worse in 10 years. The first thing we would notice is that the air is hotter than this, and it's going to be a lot more humid because always warmth brings humidity, and together the two of them would make air pollution problem worse.
Wow. And you know, recent developments in climate change research really support the urgency for the Green New Deal's 10-year timeline. What can you tell us about that?
Oh, it's a perfect timeline. I completely agree with that. As a scientist, having worked on this problem for 45 years, it's now come to a stage where we have a narrow window to avoid this climate change to become a disruptive crisis. So it's heading there. But we still have that 10-year window to divert it.
And one of the tenets of the Green New Deal is to power the United States at 100% through renewable zero-emission energy sources. What did you find out about how this would really impact public health?
It'll have a huge, huge impact, positive impact on public health. Because air pollution, the dominant source of air pollution is burning fossil fuels, coal primarily. If we switch completely to renewables, and we found about 140,000 lives can be saved. They are dying each year.
And outside of the health benefits of switching to renewables, you also found that the switch to renewables could also bring a financial benefit. Explain how you came to that conclusion.
Yeah. The financial benefit comes from, again, different sources. First is the health benefits, the willingness to pay of Americans in terms of few $1 million per life. Second is the air pollution destroys millions of tons of crops, ozone destruction. So our agriculture productivity would increase tremendously.
On Thursday, when you give your talk, what do you hope people walk away with?
They have the time scale right. We have only 10 years before a lot of people get hurt. Number two, it's going to save lives. It's going to improve people's health and lives. And you know, America has over 40 to 50 million vulnerable people, poor. They have no access to clean energy. This bill would provide energy access in a democratic way. Everyone has access. So overall, I don't see a single negative thing. One thing which has been pointed out at that bill, oh, it's going to bring the economy down, right? California and San Diego, we should be proud with the Republican mayor. We are leading this energy revolution. We have shown it doesn't hurt the economy. Our GDP is growing up while our carbon emission is going down.
Sounds like a lot's at stake. Ram Ramanathan, thank you so much for taking time to talk.
KPBS Midday Edition will have more of this interview tomorrow. Dr. Ramanathan will be part of the San Diego Green New Deal speaker series tomorrow night in City Heights. Next week, the Discovery Channel kicks off its 30th annual Shark Week. It's a time when the station dedicates its programming to the fish. It's also a reminder of the need to protect sharks. I'm joined now by Shiley Jory. She is a conservation biologist with San Diego State University. Welcome.
Thank you.
So millions of sharks are killed every year. Why is it important to save them?
So sharks are really important to marine ecosystems. They're important for top-down regulation. So for example, in coral reef ecosystems, sharks are important to maintain the lowermost level of small fish that eat algae. If we take away the sharks, these populations dwindle and then coral reefs are covered with algae, and that's what we don't want. And that's what's happening in a lot of places where there are no sharks anymore. They're also really important to maintain commercial seafood stocks that are important for human sustenance.
And some shark species have been labeled protected species. Has this helped with conservation efforts?
It has helped a little bit because it gives teeth to officials in case they find people in possession of these protected sharks, but the enforcement and policing is at a very low level. So there are still a lot of loopholes that are taken advantage of.
And can you tell us about this new non-invasive gene skimming technology that's being used to identify shark species after they've been killed and they were being sold in global markets?
Mm-hmm. So traditionally used methods require a lot of infrastructure to identify species. So if, say, we wanted to see if there are protected species in a lot of fins, it's very hard for most people to do, so they end up shipping it out. This technology depends on a handheld sequencer, in which you just put DNA and you connect it to a laptop computer, and you can start getting DNA sequences in real time. You then match these DNA sequences to a reference database, and that tells you what species it is. So it makes it much more streamlined and accessible to everybody.
And can you tell me how this device was how it was even determined that you could use this device for this reason?
Yeah, so this device is manufactured, it's called a MOnet. It's manufactured by Oxford Nanopore Technologies, they were based in the UK. And they came up with this method precisely for field use for clinical purposes, for example, for detecting Ebola outbreaks. And we thought that this could really help field work in the field of conservation, and that's how we thought of giving it a try. And we also developed this method, which requires very little prep compared to other methods, and combining that with this device makes it really feasible.
So how does identifying a shark species help protect the shark?
So using this method, if we detect somebody in possession of fins that are from the CITES protected species and that they're being exported, then that gives us teeth to implement laws that tell them they shouldn't be doing that and penalize them.
And also, in your study of the effects of contaminants, can you tell us, what pollutants would you say are the most harmful to marine species?
So plastics are at the top of the list, of course, but there are other pollutants they're persistent organic pollutants like PCBs and PBDs, which are released from industrial sites and urban areas, and that are actually really damaging to a lot of marine species, especially who are at the top of the food chain, because they end up accumulating a lot of these.
How crucial is it to increase conservation efforts for certain species of sharks?
It is very important to increase conservation efforts for sharks because they are at the top of the food chain. So if we don't conserve sharks and protect remaining populations, we are going to be struggling for our own seafood supplies. Also, sharks reproduce very slowly, they mature very slowly, and they produce very few young. So even if we take out a few individuals from a population, we are causing very long-term damage. And they are really sensitive to overfishing. So it's really important that we protect and conserve sharks.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
I'm Judy Woodruff. Tonight on the NewsHour, we break down all the highlights from Robert Mueller's testimony on Russia and possible obstruction of justice by the president. Coming up at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
Here's a recap of tonight's top stories. Former special counsel Robert Mueller has wrapped up testimony to Congress. He took part in 2 hearings to answer questions about his report on Russian interference in the 2016 election. Mueller warned Russia and other countries are likely to try again in 2020. Hundreds of convictions against immigrants might be thrown out. Since last July, those crossing the border illegally in California were sent to federal court in San Diego. They were charged and convicted in mass hearings. Today, an appeals court decided that the way immigrants were being charged is unconstitutional. A business executive from Solana Beach is the latest parent to admit guilt in the bribery college scandal. Jeffrey Bizak pleaded guilty today in Boston. Bizak will be sentenced in October. Prosecutors are seeking 9 months in prison and a fine. Now here's a look at what we're working on for tomorrow in the KPBS newsroom. Solutions for Imperial Beach. We'll hear from Supervisor Greg Cox ahead of a public forum on ideas to fix the cross-border sewage problem. And on Midday Edition, bringing 5G technology to San Diego. How the city is trying to find a way to install equipment in a way that protects neighborhood scenery. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night.